Fellow Albertans, we're living through some very challenging times. The results of this week's federal election come on top of 5 years of economic adversity for our province. So tonight I want to talk to you about a key part of our strategy to respond to these challenges, to grow our economy, to create good jobs, and to defend our province. A key part of that strategy will be the fiscal plan that we'll present in tomorrow's provincial budget. A budget that will be about bold action to turn our economy around. For the past few years, most Albertans have seen their incomes decline. Far too many have lost their jobs, and record numbers of businesses have gone under too. The value of our homes have gone down, while the cost of living has gone up. This time of adversity has been prolonged by bad government policies that chased away tens of billions of dollars in investment by killing pipelines, increasing red tape, and raising taxes on just about everything. Our economy still hasn't fully recovered from the downturn that started 5 years ago. Our province's debt during that time has quadrupled to $62 billion, and it will threaten our future by heading to over $100 billion in the next few years if we don't act now. That's because the Alberta government has run the biggest deficits in our history over the past 4 years. In fact, borrowing more than all of the Alberta governments combined since we were born as a province back in 1905. On top of all of that, the storm clouds of a potential global recession are on the horizon, and we now have a federal government that has actively campaigned against our province's vital economic interests. So the challenges are real. But you know what? We're Albertans. Through our whole history, we've proven that we are the can-do province. We are resilient, hardworking, and innovative. And together we can and will overcome these challenges. But doing so will require some tough decisions. This starts with boldly pursuing policies that will bring jobs, growth, and investment back to Alberta, while getting our finances back under control to stop the reckless dive into debt. Simply put, in an uncertain world where we can't count on support from this federal government in Ottawa, we must be self-reliant. We must put our own house in order so that we're prepared for whatever the future may bring. Now, last spring, Albertans gave our government an historic mandate to grow our economy and to stop mortgaging our future with debt. As promised in the election, step one of that fiscal plan was to appoint an independent panel of experts to conduct a deep dive into our finances. That panel's report was delivered last month by its chair, Dr. Janice MacKinnon, who is a former Saskatchewan NDP finance minister. And Dr. MacKinnon described the current state of Alberta's books as, quotes, a fiscal crisis. The MacKinnon panel was clear on how we got to this point, that we have a spending problem. Alberta, in fact, has the biggest spending provincial government in Canada by far, no matter how you count it. In fact, between 2008 and 2018, our population grew by 20%, while at the same time, the provincial budget grew by 44%. Now, if we were to match, this is according to the MacKinnon panel, if we were to match the average spending of other big provinces like Ontario, BC, and Quebec, Alberta's spending would be $10.5 billion less every year. In other words, if Alberta had the average level of provincial spending, instead of running a $7 billion deficit this year, we'd have a $4 billion surplus. Another way of looking at this is that we spend $2,000 more per person than those other provinces do. Now, the MacKinnon panel was also clear that Alberta's overspending is not getting us better results. We're not getting better health care and education for spending more. In fact, in many government programs, we get worse outcomes than these other provinces. Each year, Alberta spends about $10,000 more for each post-secondary student than they do in these other provinces. But we have some of the lowest post-secondary participation and completion rates. In other words, in program after program, Albertans pay more but get less. Now, I believe Albertans have a right to demand and to expect better, and we need to get more bang for the taxpayer's buck. Now, some folks say that we should just pay for all of this overspending by raising taxes on Albertans. But as Dr. MacKinnon said, and I want to quote, if a family was paying more than their neighbors to have their car serviced, and they were getting worse results than their neighbors, They wouldn't simply find more money to pay the higher costs. Instead, they'd find out what others were doing to get better results at lower cost. She went on to say that learning from other provinces and changing, even transforming current programs and services is the way forward to a sustainable fiscal future with programs that produce excellent results, unquote. Now, the previous government did, in fact, raise taxes on pretty much everything. Higher taxes on incomes, on employers, on property, plus their infamous carbon tax. Did that help to reduce the deficit? No. To the contrary, the economy shrank, government revenues went down, and the debt and deficit went up after those tax rates were increased. So, folks, the bottom line is that we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. And this has resulted in the biggest deficit in the country on a per-person basis. It means that we are spending $5 million each day to pay the interest on our ballooning debt. That's enough to buy 30 ambulances each day or build a new school in our province every week. Without action to stop this growth in debt, our interest payments will double from $2 billion a year now to over $4 billion in about 4 years' time. Now, Alberta already spends more on debt interest than we do on 17 of 21 government departments. I think that's outrageous. It's not just that debt is crowding out spending today, though that is obviously a big and growing problem. But there's something deeper here. I believe that endless deficit spending is also immoral. We are leaving a huge bill to future generations to pay for our overspending today, plus interest. So if we don't make difficult choices to balance our budget now, we will be jeopardizing the future of public services as billions and billions more go to bankers and bondholders instead of our schools and hospitals. So your government's solution to these big challenges will be presented to you in tomorrow's budget. This budget will be a bold plan for jobs and the economy. It'll be the most important Alberta budget in 25 years. As we promised in the spring election campaign, this budget will be based on a two-point strategy to get our finances in order. First, we've got to get people back to work by growing our economy and with it, government revenues. That's why the budget will detail job creation measures that we've already taken, like scrapping the carbon tax, and that we will continue to implement, like the job creation tax cut that economists say will create at least 55,000 new full-time private sector jobs. We'll also report on progress on our red tape reduction plan, which is on track to make Alberta the best place in Canada in which to start a business by cutting job-killing red tape by a third. We'll also detail programs to help diversify our economy in areas from petrochemicals to tourism, from the film industry to agriculture and artificial intelligence. The second part of our strategy is to make government more efficient. And we'll do that by reducing overall program spending by 2.8%. That means that we've found savings after a lot of hard work that represent 3 cents on the dollar of what we spend as a provincial government. The impact of all of this on public service jobs will be modest. Frontline services will be prioritized, and reducing the overall size of government will be done, as we committed, mainly through attrition. As we promised, health and education funding will be protected and will not be cut. In fact, to the contrary, funding for mental health and addictions and some social programs for the most vulnerable will actually increase. We've also taken a focused approach. We've reduced spending on programs that were bloated, unnecessary, or that delivered services inefficiently. And in some other cases, we have made thoughtful reallocations to move spending to more effective programs to get better bang for your buck. Now, having said all of that, let me be clear. This will be a challenging budget. It will not be easy. Some programs will be asked to do more with less. Some ineffective programs will be eliminated altogether. And some infrastructure projects will be delayed or scaled back. Not because we want to do that, but because we have to do that. These are necessary decisions. In fact, I would argue that they are long overdue. We must embrace transformative change to get a smarter government. That's not going to happen overnight. But I really do have confidence in our great public servants, our doctors, nurses, teachers, and others to help us become at least as efficient as other provincial governments in Canada. Surely we as Albertans can do that. Now, this budget, it won't be like the big cuts in the 1993 budget in terms of spending restraint. Back then, they reduced spending by 18%. Like I said, in this budget, we'll be reducing spending by less than 3% spread over 4 years. But if we don't act decisively now, we will face far bigger challenges in the future. As Dr. MacKinnon said, quotes, Alberta faces a critical financial situation, and without taking immediate and decisive action, drastic spending cuts would be required in the future, unquote. Folks, the buck stops here, and we're leading by example. That's why our MLAs have rolled back their salaries by 5%, and as Premier, I've taken a 10% pay cut. That's in addition to 5% reductions in MLA salaries a few years back. This government will no longer kick the can down the road. Given the government that we're facing in Ottawa now, we must be self-reliant to protect our future. Alberta's budget 2019 is a balanced plan that will lead to more jobs, grow the economy, and will protect vital services. This is the mandate we were elected on. We are absolutely determined to deliver on that commitment to protect our finances, come what may. No number of protests or political attacks are going to push us off course. Over the days to come, I can predict it, you're going to hear from a lot of interest groups attacking our efforts to get our fiscal house in order. But when you hear those voices, ask yourself some questions. For example, has your household, your business, or maybe your local community group ever had to trim its spending to live within your means? Have you had to find 3 cents of savings on each dollar in your own budget? Now, let's be honest. Most Albertans have had to trim a lot more than that from their budgets, and they expect their government to be able to do the same. Why can't the government of Alberta learn to operate at least as efficiently as other provincial governments in Canada? Why are we paying 20% more than other provinces for the same services, but getting less bang for the buck? And to those who oppose any meaningful kind of restraint, I ask them, what is their alternative? Do they want to keep running this province on our credit card, forcing us to borrow more just to pay interest? Do they want to force Albertans to pay even more taxes? If so, how many jobs are they prepared to kill by raising taxes on this economy? Governing is about choosing, and your government has chosen to keep our commitment to focus on jobs in the economy while getting our finances back in order. Now, let me close with a word about the future. We Albertans are natural optimists. This province has been a magnet for risk takers and hard workers for generations. Our First Nations people were our first entrepreneurs, and together we have built one of the most generous and prosperous places on the face of the earth. But now it's true, we're going through some tough times. So we need to pull together. We need to make some tough decisions and get through this. We need to stay focused on those Albertans who are still out of work or who are barely making ends meet. We need to dig deep as a community, caring for the least fortunate, while unleashing the spirit of enterprise that has made Alberta the envy of the world. And I'm confident that we'll emerge through this time of adversity stronger than ever, with a bright future of an Alberta that is strong and free. Thanks for your time.